Thank you, Yvonne. So two quick things. We are recording. We're recording this session to share with other folks that can't come. And thank you for the comment. Melissa just said that it's listed as 10:15 in the guide. So, okay, Alvin's shaking his head. So we're gonna wait then because there was a little question mark about when some sessions started. And we had, I guess what I'm being told is there was some prep time. So I'm gonna pause us, and at 10:15 we'll start again. Let me stop the recording. We don't need to record us just waiting for friends. Okay, so I've stopped the recording, and then, oh, wait a minute. We're going to wait until 10:15. I want to let everyone know we are recording this session for the participants that couldn't be with us today. My name is Andrea Amador. I'm the Senior Director of Behavioral Health Services for the Boston Public Schools. It means I have the pleasure of working with the school psychologists and social workers, as well as the mental health partners in the district. I want to introduce the other members of our team before we get started. Dr. Barrero, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Yvonne Borrero. I'm the Program Director for Behavioral Health. I work alongside Andrea with the school psychologists and our district-wide social workers. I tend to work more on the special education side of our department. Jill, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Jill Batal. I'm a school psychologist in the Behavioral Health Services Department. And my role right now is with the Comprehensive Behavioral Health Model, looking at research and evaluation related to that model that's implemented in 70 schools throughout the district.
Thank you, Jill. And Jasny, would you like to introduce yourself? She may not want to introduce herself, so I will just say that Jasny from the academics office is helping us out with the technical part of the training, so we're very thankful for Jazz, as always. So thank you all for joining us. Again, we have about 300 people registered with a wait list. So thanks, people will be joining us as we move along. If you have not renamed yourself, please do so. We would love to see the schools that you all are from. So if everyone just takes a moment and puts in the chat which school you're from, we'd love to see that. And maybe your role too, because this was open to all educators in BPS. So we're assuming that we have many teachers on the call, that we have some administrators, that we have some special ed staff, some paras. Great, thank you. We've got counselors and SEI teachers, wonderful, ABA specialist, OTs, inclusion specialist, ESL teachers, student development counselors, inclusion, secretary at the Kilner, thank you for coming, resource room teacher, Strand para, bilingual SLP, muchas gracias. Let's see. Some more special ed teachers. I see Maureen McCabe on the call. Hello, great to see you. So we've got a lot of wonderful folks joining us. Angela Christiani's here, school psychologist. Thank you, Angela. So it's great to look at the chat when you all have a second and see all of our colleagues that are joining us for this important work. Ann Madigan Davis. Hi, Ann. Ann's here from Special Ed. Nice to see you, Ann. All right, so we're going to get started. Let me just share my screen with you. And so we have a lot to talk about in a short time. We were asked by the executive cabinet to make sure that each educator, as we started the year, really had some information about how we are supporting the behavioral health of our students and ourselves. And so there are a couple of things that folks really wanted us to talk to you about. So we apologize that it's jam-packed. We wanted to make sure everything that the executive cabinet wanted us to share with you is covered. So if you've attended any of the other Returning Strong PD, you'll know that we all have the same overarching objectives to these PDs. And I'm going to just let you, so that I'm not reading to you, take a moment and I'll ask everyone just to read those objectives. Many of these objectives are directly covered in this training as we talk about how to support students with a racial and equity lens, how to help their families address what they're going to, and how do we create culturally responsive learning environments. So specifically in this training, we know that COVID has caused tremendous trauma, stress, and economic hardship for our students. We also recognize that it's disproportionately affected our students of color and our economically disadvantaged students. And so today we're going to talk about several things to help us respond to that. We're going to talk about healing-centered engagement. And if you're in a transformation school, you attended a training this summer that really gave a much deeper discussion on healing-centered engagement. We're not intending to repeat that here, but we wanted to include some important concepts of that for folks who weren't able to do that training. But we do want everyone to know that there is a training on healing-centered engagement available. We'll also remind folks of the cell signature practices. Again, that was a PD on adult cell that happened this summer for transformation schools, but it is available to everyone. We're going to just highlight how to build relationships with students, and we want to honor and recognize that all of you know how to build relationships with students, but what we want to do is share some information about why it's critical to learning, and also ask each of you to share your expertise with us about ideas that you as an individual or your school has used to build relationships with students, particularly in this remote time where it's more challenging. We're going to help you identify ways to support students in crisis and end by talking about self-care. So as we begin, it's really important to us that we make the connection in all of our work between the alignment of the work we're talking about and the alignment of our culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. And for this PD, there's a very clear alignment that the culturally and linguistically sustaining practices and the continuum developed by the district, as well as the CRIOP pillars, are perfectly aligned with how we approach healing-centered engagement. So if you are someone, again, who hasn't had the opportunity to attend a training on CLSP and the continuum, or on the CRIOP, both of those trainings are available. We strongly encourage you to do so, as we'll all be adopting the CRIOP. And in the bottom of this PowerPoint is a link to both the Office of Achievement Gap toolkits and CRIOP, the CRIOP toolkit. So the CRIOP has 6 pillars for those of you that aren't familiar, and it really looks at culturally responsive practices we should be using in schools. And the first pillar is classroom relationships, and that's really what we're going to talk a lot about today, as well as family collaboration. The CRIOP also looks at assessment practices, instructional practices, discourse, and critical consciousness. So as we begin to talk about healing-centered engagement, many of you are familiar with trauma response or trauma-sensitive schools. For years as a district, we've been engaged in creating trauma-sensitive schools. Many of you have attended PD. Many of you maybe have read what's often called the Purple Book, the book from Mass Advocates for Children on educating traumatized children. So we've known for years in BPS, it's really important for us to honor and support our students who've experienced trauma. But the field is shifting away from the terminology of trauma response or trauma-sensitive schools to healing-centered engagement. And it's really the principles that, if you think about trauma-informed care, it was really thinking about what do we need to do to mitigate the impact that trauma has had on our students and their learning, and how do we help that person. But as we think about that definition of trauma response, it's really an important term. Trauma sensitive schools is important and it's done great work, but it doesn't actually focus on the whole child. It tends to focus on what happened to the child. It tends to come from a deficit-based approach. And healing-centered engagement really starts to talk about how do we shift from what happened to the child to what's good with the child? And how can we activate that child and the child's family's resiliency and skills in healing to help support the child in healing from their experience? There's a South African term called Ubuntu. I always have to make sure I say it correctly. And it's the phrase, if any of you have been trained by Life is Good, you'll hear them say that often. And it really talks about I am because we are, and how do we have a collective experience when we're supporting students and to heal from trauma. So there are some key elements to healing-centered engagement, and it really means that our systems need to be fixed, that our systems need to make sure that they're culturally grounded, that we are recognizing healing occurs collectively, right? Our school community often has to heal after a traumatic event. Our families have to heal. And as we're healing collectively, we're also individually supporting students. And that we're supporting students, families in our schools communities from an asset-based approach versus a deficit-based model. It also recognizes that we as adults, we as staff people have healing that we have to do in order to be able to serve our students well and engage in our own self-care. And I just want to remind folks, it may feel, if you haven't heard about healing-centered engagement, it may feel like we're going kind of fast. It is its own training. We just want to remind folks that there's a whole training on healing-centered engagement, and we would love for you to take that. But for today, we just want to make you aware of some of the key elements as we go back to school and we're helping our students heal from both the COVID-19 as well as the social injustices that we've been experiencing the last several months acutely, and for many families for centuries. So how do we build it in schools? How do we build healing-centered engagement in schools? One way is to build empathy with our students, for adults to share stories about themselves and their experiences and build that relationship. Another way is encouraging students to dream and imagine and be hopeful and optimistic, so they're thinking about the future and the potential of the future. It also, another idea is to build critical reflection so that we're really allowing both ourselves and our students to reflect on their experience and reflect on how themselves and their families have healed from experiences in their community in the past. So it's hard with a group this big to make sure that we're hearing everyone's voices and being really interactive. So we've built several times through the training where we want to get some feedback from you, and here's one of those times. So in the chat, we're asking all of you to think about what are the kinds of things that you do in your classroom to support healing engagement. So if folks can take a second, and because I'm presenting Jill and Yvonne, I can't see the chat, so I'll ask one of you to just call out a few of them as people respond.
Will do.
As people are typing, I want to thank Ashia for correcting our pronunciation. Ubuntu, I believe.
Thank you.
Correct.
Ubuntu.
Thank you.
Using RJ circles, peace corners, community circles, student check-ins, going fast, elevating student voices, wellness breaks, movement, breathing, community meetings, second step. We like that one.
I appreciate Ms. Rivkin said hearing from every student who wishes to share, but giving space for those that don't.
Creating an oasis for my students, a place they know they can be safe and be themselves. Humor. Students taking care of classroom plants. Snacks. Thinking spaces. Consistent routines.
Well, thank you all for sharing. Those are great ideas. And if you see an idea that you like and would like more information from that colleague, please feel free to either chat them here or email them. We really want to learn from the wonderful things happening in so many schools. I definitely want to be in Miss Jones' classroom where there's an oasis, I believe she said. That's wonderful. So thank you all. So as we think about these spaces that we're trying to create, and obviously many of you are really being very intentional about creating these spaces, we wanted to share these 24 indicators of culturally responsive instruction. And again, we today are focusing more on classroom relationships and family collaboration, but there's examples here for all the CRIOP pillars. So some of the things for classroom relationship they call out as an indicator is student collaboration. How are we supporting students to work authentically with each other? How are we creating atmospheres of respect? And it sounds like many of you, that's really important to you as you elevate student voice. How do we hold high expectations for our kids and exhibit to them the ethics of care that we have for them? In terms of families, I just want to highlight that one as well. How are we creating genuine family partnerships? I'm a BPS parent. All of my kids have gone to BPS. And there's definitely been a difference in some of the schools as to whether they want parents just to come when they need to do something versus they feel like parents are genuinely part of the school community. And as a parent, I always appreciate that. How are we finding ways to work with our families that meet their needs versus ours? At one point, my kids went to a school that had like a 40-minute show at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And I thought, that is not a way to really authentically engage parents when most parents have to work. So how do we involve families in ways that are meaningful to them, that bring in their knowledge, their expertise, their culture in really robust and meaningful ways? And how are we understanding the culture of the families we serve? So I'll use the Sarah Greenwood as an example that people know I'm biased. I love the Sarah Greenwood School. It was my first school in BPS back in 1998. And as a school, we went out of our way to really have authentic, warm relationships with our families. And one of the ways we did it then, this was some time ago, was having a monthly family dinner, and families and staff all brought food from their cultures and we shared them together. And it was just a really warm and special community. And it was a great way to bring our families together and get to know the cultures of the different families. So I just used that as an example. But these are some indicators that the CRIOP looks at and some ideas of how we can accomplish them in a culturally responsive way. So some working assumptions we have, but we want to be really clear to folks, are that there's a very strong connection between the CRIOP, family engagement, warm classrooms, and student relationships. And we want to make sure that we're naming that and not just implying it. And we, again, want to make sure that everyone has access to the Office of Opportunity Gap Toolkit, which is linked on the bottom left, and CRIOP Toolkit and resources that's linked on the bottom right. And I welcome Jill and Yvonne, I should say that again, to just jump in if I'm forgetting something. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen to allow Jill to share her screen, and she's going to talk to us about self-signature practices. If I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen, Jill.
Can you just keep sharing it actually?
Sure, sure.
And I'll.
Let me go back.
Okay, so healing-centered engagement, those working assumptions that we saw on the left about healing-centered engagement also really come into play when we're talking about social emotional learning. And so if people are familiar, the Office of Social Emotional Learning has put together a flyer on the CEL signature practices. You may have already seen this, so we'll give you a quick overview here, and then the last slide gives you a link to the actual flyer. So you can go to the next slide. So the CEL signature practices are just 3 ways that we can be sure within all of our school communities to be establishing routines that prioritize the social emotional learning and well-being of our students and our classroom communities. And so the 3 signature practices are a way that you can structure your classroom, whether it's virtual or in person. And the first is a welcoming ritual. So activities that allow for everyone's voice to be heard and promote connection and community. And so on the flyer, you'll see a description of what the signature practice is and some examples. And you'll also find links to more tools in their toolkit for welcoming practices, welcoming rituals, sorry. So that is the first CEL signature practice. Following a welcoming ritual, the second CEL signature practice is engaging practices. So these are opportunities to make sense and brain breaks and collaborate around learning and meaningful activities. And so here you'll see a description on the left and then some more classroom examples on the flyer. And then the third signature practice is an optimistic closure. And this, once again, at the end of a lesson, provides an opportunity for connection and closure on the topics that you've talked about in your lesson, and having students and your classroom community reflect on their connection with that learning. And so that kind of structure can be applied in a period of time that you might have designated for social emotional learning, but it can also be easily woven into academic content. And so that you're covering those academic standards, but in this way that promotes and reinforces connection. And so these 3 signature practices are just kind of a way to help support you in doing that as you think about instruction. Here at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the link to the full flyer. And they have a toolkit that has many more activities. One thing that I've heard a lot of people talking about, a lot of teachers talking about, is when we think about social emotional learning going into this school year, how are we doing it in a way that is truly authentic and relevant to what our students and what our families and what our staff are experiencing? So how are we not just, for our opening rituals, it's important to be hopeful, it's important to bring up the positives, but we also need to make space for those harder conversations and give people an outlet to share what they're struggling with, and not always end on a positive, optimistic note. So making space for genuine feedback on how people are feeling so that they can connect to their learning in meaningful ways is really important. And now we're going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of need. So for those of you who listened in this morning to the superintendent's remarks and Jessica Tang's remarks, Jessica Tang brought up this idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the famous catchphrase, Maslow before Bloom. Have people heard that Maslow before Bloom recently? I can't really see people's screens, so I think a lot of people have heard that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what his. Thank you for the chat box. Okay, so on the next slide, this is an actual image of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow talked about in order for us as human beings to do sort of the self-actualization work, achieving our full potential, there's a lot that we need before we can get there. So physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness, esteem. And if we have all those things, then we are ready to move on to self-actualization. And if you think about Bloom's taxonomy of moving from knowledge to creation and evaluation, can you go back one? Thank you. You can think of that taxonomy as sitting on top of self-actualization. So those are things that we can do once we have all of these, the bottom foundations in place. And this concept of attending to Maslow's hierarchy of needs has always been the case. It's always been true that our students can't learn unless they have these basic needs met. And so, or they can't do their best learning unless they have these basic needs met. And so now more than ever, there's a recognition that we really need to intentionally attend to this. And as you can see, it ties in really closely with CLSP 2. So thinking about cultural learning and relationship building. It also ties right into the CRIOP, the pillar 1 around classroom relationships. And for those of you who have read Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, this hierarchy definitely comes into play when we think about the work we need to do before we get to the content. And so the next slide has a video that Andrea's going to play. This is an educator named Jeff Duncan Andrade. He's an educator out in Oakland. And this is just a really short clip where he talks about the importance of Maslow's hierarchy of need. So I'm going to let him talk instead of me. Andrea, I think you have to share your audio if you click the share button again. There's a checkbox on the bottom that says share computer audio.
It's a basic needs.
Jill, I don't see that checkbox. Can you hear it if I unmute myself?
Framework.
Yes.
When you get stuck with a kid, don't math them up. Okay, don't literacy them up. Human them up. And work back to the bottom of the base. Food, clothing, shelter, safety. If you don't get that right, they ain't learning math. I don't care how many different Common Core strategies you use. And you get that right, then you got to ask yourself, do they feel a sense of love and belonging? And you get that right, then you got to ask yourself, do they love themselves? Do they have self-esteem? And you get that right, and everything that we know in the research is that kid starts to self-actualize. And your most successful students, no matter where they come from, no matter who their families are, no matter what their zip code is, self-actualize. That's the goal.
I think he says it well.
He does. So he is featured in a ton of keynote addresses online, and you can watch the whole talk that he gives. But that was just a quick clip from Maslow. But here is a visual that just puts Bloom on top of Maslow, and a reminder that our students don't care what we know until they know that we care. And so really taking the time this year and every year to build authentic relationships with students and families to support that learning that we will do throughout the year. So I mentioned the connection with CRIOP and CLSP Competency 2 already, but we're wondering in the chat box if you can help share with us some of the ways that you form relationships with students, and particularly if you have strategies that you're using now through remote learning that might be helpful to share with others, drop those into the chat box as well. Think about, how do you know about students' strengths and weaknesses? How do you know about their interests and hobbies? And what do you know about their cultural background? And how do you build those relationships and learn more, recognizing that our students and our families are the experts on themselves and their communities. And thank you, Ashia, for mentioning we're not conflating student achievement with actualization. actualization can mask other issues on the pyramid, for sure.
If Jill or Yvonne, if you could share some of the chats, I can't see them.
Yep. So some people are saying they use surveys. Some people have breakfast and eat with their students and families. Talk with them during snack and recess. Conversations outside of class time.
Team building. See the students when you engage with them, really see them in quotation marks. Have a basic foundational understanding of culture and language. I would say speak their language in many ways, not just speak another language. Include them in some activity and lessons. Get their ideas and suggestions. Taking time to learn their names. That can be difficult, but absolutely, oh, it goes too fast. I missed that last part. Breaks to dance. Oh, I want to go to that classroom. The latest dances and laugh together. Lunch bunch.
Awesome. And taking time to connect with families. Absolutely. So you all, as teachers and educators, we do this all the time. I think what we're thinking about going into this year is how do we do more of this? How do we really prioritize this and make it clear to every single student and every single family that they are part of our community, and we are interested in building authentic, genuine relationships with all of our students and all of our families, so that we can meet those basic needs on the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy, and then get to the learning throughout the year. Okay, so building relationships, we just want to be really intentional about connecting this back, not just to CLSP, but also the anti-racist frame that we have for the district throughout the year. And so once again, building these relationships intentionally, and thinking about how our relationships impact our ability to really engage in true anti-racist work together, and have the conversations and the changes in our practice that allow us to build a better system for all of our learners and all of our families. And I will turn it back over to Andrea, I believe.
So again, we recognize that this PD has a lot of different aspects, but braided together, they're how we as educators are going to respond at tier 1 to the impact of COVID and closure on our students. And so first, we just need to acknowledge the stress that some of our students and staff have faced. It's really important that we also acknowledge, and I know people on this call do, that our staff have been impacted as well. Many of our staff members have lost a loved one. Many of our staff members have a partner or a spouse who've lost their job because of this. And as our families have been dealing with these same things, we also just want to name and honor that our staff has as well. So some of the things that we've been supporting students and staff on during COVID are the fear of people getting sick or actually having family members get sick and die. When so many people are stuck in homes together, we know that that can exaggerate some pre-existing mental health issues, that it can lead to domestic violence. Sadly, domestic violence and physical abuse are on the rise. Community violence is on the rise in our city. All of that obviously impacts our kids. There are some of our children who are in homes where people aren't affirming their gender, or they're not their gender identity, or they're not feeling safe. For many of our kids, school is a safe haven, and they haven't had that, and that's very stressful. I know for many of us as adults, we're also stressed not being able to go to work, to see our friends, We've had, as my daughter, who's a senior in BPS, said, I have all the hard parts of school and none of the fun parts of school. And I really liked when she said that, because it's kind of how I felt about work, right? We've had all the hard parts of work, but not all the joy of being with kids, the joy of being with colleagues, of seeing successes. So that stress of being home and closures impacted all of us, and not just emotionally, but also on our body and our brain. Robert Macy, who's been a longtime partner in our crisis response work, has said the body pays the toll for the trauma and stress that our brain is feeling. And so many of us may be experiencing physical symptoms, headaches, difficulty sleeping, fatigue, depression. And so it's really important that we're all starting the school year by checking in on our own mental health and our students' mental health. And some strategies to do this include, as Jill said, some welcoming rituals. And you all gave great examples of how we could use those cell signature practices of a welcoming ritual to really start to invite students to share their feelings and thoughts. And as Jill said, we do want to spread optimism. We want to choose optimism this school year and know that great things can happen, but that doesn't mean we don't want to also acknowledge what kids have experienced and give them an opportunity to talk about that. So these hyperlinks have some specific ideas that folks can do. We know when closure started, one of the questions we got often from teachers and from principals was, how do we talk to kids about what's going on? Is it okay to ask them, do you have food? Do you feel safe at home? Is there something you need? And to acknowledge to our students that when we're checking in with them, that what they're experiencing is normal. Sometimes it's hard for kids to say, my family doesn't have enough food, but if we normalize those conversations and say, we know many families do not have enough food. Some parents have lost their jobs. Some people have lost their home. Just normalizing those experiences that are being felt in our community helps a student, when you check in with them, be more likely to share what's going on. And we know that all of us have different relationships with kids, and kids have people that they really connect to. And if you are having a hard time connecting with a kid and the student isn't sharing, but you feel like there may be something going on, asking someone else that the child perhaps is close to check in with may help the child feel safe enough to share with you what's going on. So here are some ideas on how to do that. Again, many of you named great ideas, including the RJ work and the community circles. And if you need help, if you're worried about a student, we're going to talk about that, but please know that the school psychologists and social workers are here to help you. But we really want to make sure folks know there are times where we should ask for help. If the child really seems to be having trouble coping being at home, I know it was a huge disappointment for a lot of educators, parents, and kids that we weren't coming back to school. Now, that recognizes all of the safety issues and concerns. I'm not dismissing the concerns people have about being back in school, but it was a disappointment for many that they couldn't get back to a normal routine, to see their friends, to get out of the house. So some kids may have trouble coping, that the end isn't as near as they had hoped to this, and how to reach out to your school psychologist or your social worker to ask them for help. And if you're in a school and you don't know who your school psychologist or your social worker is, please just send an email to Jill, Yvonne, or I, and we'll let you know today who your school psychologist or social worker is. We just have one vacancy, but beyond that, we can tell you. Have a conversation with the family. We always want to say and acknowledge that families are the experts of their children, and they can tell you if they're worried or not. So in the spring, you'll recall that we did a family needs survey. Around 6,000 families said, I'm really concerned about my child's mental health. And so getting that parents, having a conversation with parent and getting their insight into their child's important. Check to see if the student already has an outside mental health provider. All of our mental health providers continue to offer remote mental health services. So if that child has a provider, they can continue to be seen. If you need help getting them a provider, then again, the school psychologist and social worker in your school can help. Asking the family if there are any changes. Has the family moved? Or has maybe a parent switched jobs? Do they have new family members living? Understanding what's happening in that child's life is really important. And figuring out if this is a new behavior, if this is a new, perhaps maladaptive coping strategy, it's important to know that. And if these things are coming up, to seek help. The superintendent's been very clear that all schools need a robust student support team. So you can reach out to your school psychologist and social worker, and we can also be reaching out to our student support teams. We also want to make sure that folks know that there's a range of emergency mental health services available for kids. So all BPS school psychologists and social workers have provided counseling during closure and will continue to do so. All mental health partners have continued to see the students on their caseload and will continue to do so. And all of our best team urgent services have been available during closure and will continue to do so. We also have a wonderful partnership with the neighborhood trauma teams, and those trauma teams can go to the home and offer support in ways that our BPS staff can't. So it's important for folks to know that these all exist. So now we're going to shift. We've talked a lot about how to build a strong tier 1, how to create safe and culturally responsive classrooms to support our kids returning from trauma. And I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Barrero, who's going to talk about how we support ourselves. Yvonne, do you want to share your screen?
No, you can keep yours up. Thank you,
great.
Andrea.
You guys are just so nice to me.
Thank you.
All right. I'm on it.
And I just want to give people a chance if they want to put any questions in the chat box. This is the last section of the presentation, so we make sure we answer any questions. And just if you need a moment just to get up and stretch, I know we've been sitting down. I did get up for a moment and just stretched before this last section. Please feel free to do so, but we want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask any questions or clarify anything before we wrap up our session today. For me, this is the most important section of today because it's about you as a teacher, as a staff member, and we really want to end on this positive note and really give you a closure that it's about you as the most important piece of our district. Jill was talking a little bit about Maslow and Bloom, right? Maslow before Bloom. And I'm just going to add, it's more really about you before Maslow and before Bloom, because our students really need you. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're a coach, whether you're a psychologist, whatever role you have, you are the person that really the kids look at first, right? Whether you are the secretary, whether you are, the bus driver, whether you are the bus monitor, whoever it is, you are that human that interacts with the students, right? So Maslow or Bloom, it doesn't matter. It's you. You're the person that really needs to be there for the student. You're the one creating that relationship. And I know how hard it is before this virtual world. You are the one that the kid sees. You're the one that connects with the student. You're the one that really maybe inspires the student to come to school. And now that has shifted. So the next couple of slides will be about what do we need for you to really be that person, to continue to be that person, and in this virtual world, right? And that somebody put in the chat box, and Jill, if you could continue to read those chats would be good. How do I connect with people over the internet, over this Zoom, when it's so difficult to do? And it's hard, right? My nephew just had a baby and we had to see this baby on Zoom, and it's just so hard because all I want to do is just grab the baby and hug and kiss him, right? And I can't do that. But let's think for a moment, what makes me happy? What is that piece of my life that I need to really keep going? And I can't do it because of this virtual world. So mindfulness is one of those things that can I transcend this virtual world for even 2 or 3 minutes? So pick whatever it is that makes you happy, right? Somebody said in the previous chat, just for a moment, dance. I love to dance. That's part of what my culture is all about. So just transcend for a second with your students, right? And what makes them happy. But think about yourself. Over the weekend, I went to the White Mountains trying to escape Boston for a little bit. And I took a picture of several places that I am going to put as a screensaver. And that's going to be my happy place because I'm on the computer 8, 10, 12 hours a day. That's going to be my mindfulness moment from now on, at least until we go back to whatever we go back to, right? I think for us as professionals, we really need to have a space where we can connect to. Maybe stop the video and go to that happy place where nobody else needs to know what that is. That is my place. That is the place where I can go to. We have to give ourselves permission to go there. And because we don't do that, we don't give ourselves permission to say, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I can't do another Zoom meeting, right? We have to give ourselves permission to be confused, to be scared, to be worried, and that's okay. Because we cannot human our kids up if we don't accept that we too are afraid, that we too are worried. So strategies for well-being, we have to accept those for us first. And we are very resilient. Think about it. What have we been doing for the last few months? We've created Google Classrooms. We have survived Zoom. We've become very technology savvy, right, Jill? Jill has created a lot of things for us, and we're like, now we're Zoom experts. But we
learn macros.
I've done macros. Woo, that's amazing. So all of these things that we have learned in a short period of time, teachers have created Google Classrooms in several languages. We have put together, social emotional learning environments. Most of our psychologists have done those in different languages. We've done tip of the day in different languages. We've done coffee hours for parents. I mean, think about the amount of work that has been put in during this COVID world. But how much have we really put in for ourselves? So this mindful moment is just, it could be 2 or 3 minutes a day for you to really forgive yourself and say to yourself, I just need a break. I just need 2 or 3 minutes, even if it's just going outside, but just to give yourself a time for a break. Next slide, please. And that's being kind to yourself, right? We can't go and get a massage, those of us who like to get a massage, because many of those places are still closed. So what can you do to just treat yourself? The city gives us free employee assistance programs that we could still do online. Those are free, so we could be using those. But what can you do at home to avoid that burnout? And all of these are hyperlinked, so you could look for more resources there. But anxiety comes through, even when we're trying to hide it. And Andrea talked a little bit about this. The body will show it. You will not sleep. You start getting these aches. Oh, my knees hurt. My back hurt. I got this twitch over here. This is all the way our body tells us that things are not going well, right? If Michelle Obama can talk about her slight depression and be open about it, we can also say, I'm having too much, I need a break, right? So when we're true to ourselves, we can then start to be able to work with our students and really tell them, yeah, I am also a little concerned, but together, yeah, and all of those strategies that you guys put earlier on our chat, we'll work through this. This is going to be something we can do together. Challenge your thoughts. So I am worried about this. Can I change it? Can I stop the virus from happening. So sometimes we really have to check in our thoughts and how real are my intentions about this particular, response to stress. Can this vaccine, is this really a true vaccine? Let me research on it. Let me look for some more. So really take what's happening. Do I really need to be on the TV looking at the news, right? So challenge your thoughts, look through research, read Harvard medical reviews instead of looking at the internet. Learn to identify and name your emotions. That is a skill that later you can use with your students, right? The psychologists also have lots of great resources to labeling your emotions, especially age appropriate. So if you work with kindergarten students, they can help you work with emotions at that grade level. Next slide, please. Get up and move. And that, I have to say, I'm not very good at, because I tend to sit very long periods of time. But what I've done is I put a timer on my phone and make sure that I get up. I used to have a watch that would beep if I didn't get up every half hour, but that was so annoying and I stopped using it. But now the phone just, sends me a message, and then I purposefully get up and I go up and down the stairs. So physical exercise will really booster your energy, and it gets you going. Whatever works for you, because this is about you. Remember, you before Maslow and Bloom. This is important for you. You cannot be an effective teacher or coach or related service provider if you are not well, if you are not strong, if you are not taking care of yourself. For me, the next piece, seek support from friends and colleagues, is critical, right? In our office, because we were together, we would sit and either have coffee or just have 5 or 10 minutes to check in with each other. We do it on Zoom, right? We would have a meeting at least once a week, 5 or 10 minutes to check in on everyone. We were also sending each other some sort of either an email or snail mail or a text, hey, how are you doing? Just to make sure that we were checking in on people, right? That was wonderful. Just getting a little note from someone saying, hey, thinking of you today, I hope you're doing well. We can still do that. Gchat with our Gmails, anything to really just keep ourselves connected. Now that we're able to be outside some more, just going outside, you don't have to go to restaurants or anything like that, just walking around the neighborhood, checking in with your neighbors, whatever works for you. And even with our students, if you go outside, even to Franklin Park Zoo and, maybe have run into some of your students, those are things that keep you connected with your friends, with your colleagues, with your neighbors, because connections is what it's all about, keeping us really engaged with others. Next slide, please. So I want you to take a couple of minutes, and you don't have to write this in the chat box. You could write it in your personal notes, but think about what is most important for my personal well-being. Maybe you're concerned you have family that is not in Massachusetts, it's outside of the country, and you are really worried about them. Is that something that you need to take off your plate, you need to address? How are you going to prioritize these things throughout the year to support yourself? Do you need to connect with them? Do you need to get someone to take care of your family that is away? What do I need from others to support me in prioritizing these things? So do you need to buy a computer so you can see, and mail it to them so you can see them through Zoom? What is it that you need? This is for you. So just take a minute, maybe write a couple of things down. Is it something at school? Do you need, your team members to support you with a student that you're concerned about? Do you need something in your classroom? What is it that will make your school year, better? Do you need materials? Do you need help with some technology? Would you like to set up another Google Classroom? Do you need more support with writing programs or writing your curriculum? Whatever it is, what is it that you need that will make your school year better? So we'll give you a couple minutes to write it down. You don't have to put it in the chat. We'll take a minute or so. Okay, Andrea, you want to move on to the next slide? Perfect, thank you. So some people put here more technology PDs, more PPE, greater flexibility from administrators. That's great. Childcare. Focusing less on stress, prioritizing by taking mini breaks, doing meditation. There's some great apps that are really good about meditation because it reminds you when to take a meditation break. And Andrea, we could also link in the Life is Good. Life is Good is giving out lots of trainings, and they're really good about helping you with meditation and even the music piece. Just thinking about just disconnecting and just allowing the music to help you with meditation is really good. Instruction equipment such as document cameras and mics. The technology department has a lot of materials that they would let you borrow. So reaching out to the technology department, just being very specific of what you need. You want a camera to videotape X, Y, and Z because you want to create webinars, for example. They will be really good about that. So this last
Sorry, I was going to jump in to say the OIT has a ton of PDs also on how to do many of these aspects of curriculum. I saw someone said more PDs on tech stuff. We've been really amazed with the number of PDs they have available, so just check out their website.
Yeah, and they're also working on a talking point, I believe it's called, that does it in a variety of languages. So there's, it's an app that will help you translate material. So that would be really nice if you were creating materials that you could do it in other languages. So you could also reach out to the translation and interpretation department. Alan Dowling is the person to reach out to, that they could help you if you wanted to have the material in other languages. That would be awesome to do.
And Yvonne, there's a request for the link to the OIT website. I can't do that until I stop sharing my screen, but I will link it when I stop sharing my screen. And then the Life is Good training that Yvonne referred to is a wonderful training. It just opened. It's free for all BPS educators, and information went out in around BPS and also in Corey Harris's weekly email. So I'll share that link once I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Andrea. So this is what is in your toolbox. When I was a teacher many, many years ago, we didn't have all of this technology. And I would carry in my office, which is the trunk of my car, my toolbox, my literal toolbox, right? And I would grab everything I could from teachers, other teachers, and I would keep it in my office. And I would always have to run into my car and, oh, I have this great worksheet. And I would run in there and I'd have a worksheet for this, that, and the other. Now everything's on the computer, right? But think about your virtual toolbox and things that you know work for X, Y, and Z, right? And what do you bring to your classroom? And I know as teachers or educators in general, this particular thing I did with this student that was great. Either a video or a TED Talk or an app that really works for a student that you want to share with this community. You want to put it in our chat box. This was really a great, it engaged student. And I will be the first one to share one out. It's called Nearpod. And some of you have heard me talk about Nearpod when I was in OELL. Nearpod is a platform that has all sorts of lessons in a variety of languages that students can access on their own or through a teacher, right? Or through teacher-led lessons. And it could be from going to see a college to going to talk about depression and anxiety. There are also some lessons for you as a teacher. So that toolbox could be shared with anyone. Boston is in the process of getting a license for everybody, which is awesome because it was just for English learners with disabilities. And that will probably come out the technology office. That's in the works right now, but that's a great tool. And for you as a teacher, if you needed something for like meditation or something about anxiety, that's a tool you can use for yourself as well. So I will put it in the chat box as soon as we go back to the big screen. So take a minute and share something. You could share something for students, but also share something that has worked for you. So you can have a toolbox for personal meditation tools or personal breakout sessions just for you, because this section was just personal, right? What has worked for you as a teacher, whether it's connecting with other professionals, reaching out for the district, or because again, I want to make sure you understand that without you, Maslow and Bloom have nothing to do. You are critical to the work we do. Students will not make any progress without you. You are critical to everything that happens in Boston. So we really need for you to move forward. We really need for you to be strong. And we really need for you to understand that you are the front line. And when you're strong, everyone else will follow, because you are really the key component in all of this. And kids really look up to you and they need you. So again, I thank you for the work you do. It's great to be a part of this team, and in behavioral health, and I know I speak for Andrea, we're here to support you. And whatever you need, if you reach out and look at our page, we have a lot of resources there that you could look at and you could borrow from our page. We have a lot of the parent engagement materials that you could also use and share with your communities. We have some materials done in other languages that you're more than welcome to use as well. And please let us know if you need anything. So Andrea, I think the next slide is just our information.
The resources, yeah, we
Yes.
just want to make sure folks realize that there's a lot of trainings that dive deep into some of the things we talked about today. So in terms of students in crisis, we have trainings on threat assessment, emergency management, suicide risk assessment. In terms of how to support Tier 1, we have trainings on PBIS. The cell department offers adult cell training. Office of Achievement Gap has PRIOP and CSLP trainings. And then as part of some of the overreaching PD, we're doing cross-departmentally. We have the healing centered engagement we talked about at Tier 1, and there's also a Tier 2 supporting kids who are struggling, and Tier 3 supporting kids in crisis training. So we just want to make sure that people know there's a lot of other trainings that dive deeper into the topics we've brought up today. As Yvonne mentioned, all of our contact information is in here, and we have a whole team of excuse me, our central office team wants to help. And then every BPS school has a school psychologist part-time and has access to a social worker. Transformation schools have a full-time social worker. Some schools have hired their own social worker, and then all schools have access to a central social worker. We also want to make sure that you're aware that the Mass Department of Ed has this created this resource called Creating Positive Learning Environments, and it's really highlights a lot of the stuff we talked about today, how to create those positive spaces as we welcome kids back. And the great thing about this document, because I don't often tell the great work of Department of Ed, but this document is really robust. It has tons of hyperlinks to examples and resources. So if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. It has a lot of great resources. And our exit, excuse me, the exit ticket is here. Let me see if I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I have it, Andrea. I'm going to post it right now.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing so that Yvonne can share the exit ticket. That is your way of proving you attended today and getting a PD certificate. And if you guys just wait 1 second while you do your exit ticket, I will post the OIT website that folks asked about. And I will post the Life is Good training. So on the main BPS website, there's a box that's called Remote Learning Resources. So there's a whole bunch of information about the students, and then there's a whole page of things of all their trainings. So I'm gonna paste it here, but just know you literally just have to Google BPS OIT, and the main page comes up, and then there's a box that talks about that.
And I'm sorry, Andrea, I just posted I'll post it again, the exit ticket. So you'll see my name. Here it is again. RBS Professional Learning. Just click that and you'll be able to do the exit ticket from there.
And I just put a link to a document with the Life is Good PowerPoint. So the question about the official title is Supporting the Behavioral Health of Students and Staff. And we thank you all for coming. We'll stay on if anyone has questions. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you in other PDs and in your buildings once we all can get back to a building. So there's someone saying that it won't let you click on the exit ticket. I was able to just cut and paste the link Yvonne sent, and it opened for me. So if clicking on Yvonne's link doesn't work for you, cut it and paste it into your browser, and that should work. Both ways worked for me, but if clicking isn't working for you, cut and paste it into your browser. Thanks to everyone who joined us. Hi, Colleen Galvin, I see you. I hope you're doing well.
I also wanted to share that the principals have a list of the psychologists and the social workers by building. So you might, if you have any questions, principals have access to that list. And the COS.
Okay, so Yvonne, I think we have to close this Zoom because we have another team using this Zoom for the bandwidth. So we're going to say goodbye to everyone. We appreciate you coming. And just email us if you have any problems.
Stop the recording, Andrea.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.